fourth and final panel before a brief closing session. This panel will be on mobilizing resources for sustained gender justice initiatives, which will explore funding, advocacy, and community-based strategies to support Afghan women and long-term efforts for gender justice. We're very honored to have Ms. Mariam Safi as our moderator. She's the founding director of the Organization for Policy Research and Development Studies, which she established in Afghanistan in 2014, and which is operated from Toronto since 2021. Her organization focuses on strengthening democratic governance through policy research, training, and advocacy. With over a decade of experience working with the UN, European Union, NATO, and academic institutions, Ms. Safi is a recognized expert on Afghan affairs and a champion for women researchers. So we're very pleased and honored that she will be moderating this session. Please.
Thank you very much. It's indeed a privilege to be here with you all. I'd like to thank Massey College, UFT, for bringing us all together today. I can't tell you how much we need to ensure to sustain such forums, especially now more than ever. So I hope it certainly does continue. Today we have an excellent panel for you all, where we're going to be talking about something that has now become quite a serious and a difficult discussion. And that's going to be on raising funds to be able to continue to do the advocacy and the important work that Afghan-led organizations carry out in Afghanistan and those who are outside of Afghanistan. And with me today, I've got a group of distinguished panelists with me. I will introduce them to you now before we head on to our questions. We have with us Ms. Nargis Nehan, sitting to my right, dubbed the Iron Woman of Kabul by Bloomberg, is a prominent Afghan advocate for women's rights and democracy. She has held key public roles, including acting Minister of Mines and Petroleum, Treasurer of Afghanistan, and senior advisor to multiple ministries. In exile since 2021, she founded FARAGEER to advance Afghan women's agency in global policy discussions. Previously, she led Equality for Peace and Democracy, empowering women in youth. In 2024, Canada awarded Ms. Nehan awarded her the King Charles III Coronation Medal for her advocacy. We also have with us today Ms. Faryal Dehqan, who holds a PhD in finance and is a member of Her Future. She currently serves as the Dean of Faculty of Language Education and Skills Development at Roshna Online University. At Roshna, she teaches graduate level courses in financial management. Dedicated to women's empowerment and financial literacy, she actively contributes to creating positive social change. Her research focuses on financial support, community-based strategies, and long-term efforts to promote gender justice for Afghan women. We also have with us Ms. Naheed Farid, who is an Afghan human rights defender and an HLEG member. She is a former Afghan parliamentarian and chair of the House of Standing Committee of Women's Affairs. Elected in 2010, she was Afghanistan's youngest ever lawmaker. She has served as a global technical advisor at the International Republican Institute and a visiting scholar at Princeton. A George Washington University alumna, she founded the Afghan Education Pathways Program and has received honors from Forbes, Grassroots, Diplomat, and the Italian government. Since the Taliban takeover, she has been a leading global advocate for human rights, girls' education, speaking at the UN, UK, EU parliaments, and US Congress. And last but certainly not least, we have Dr. Habiba Sarabi with us today, who is a trailblazing Afghan politician, activist, and reformer dedicated to women's rights and peace building. She was Afghanistan's first female provincial governor, leading Bamyan province from 2005 onwards. She's a former Minister of Women's Affairs. Ms. Sarabi has been a key advocate for gender equality, serving as an advisor on women and youth, and later as the deputy to Afghanistan's High Peace Council. She was a member of the Afghan government's negotiation team with the Taliban, and has been awarded several, and has been the recipient of several awards, including the Peace Prize recipient. She now serves on the steering committee of the World Forum on Afghanistan and is a non-resident fellow of Princeton University. With that, as you've heard today in several of the panels we had, you've heard about the steps taken so far with the ICJ, the ICC, Canada's role, the opportunities that are currently available to us in advancing justice for Afghan women, what Canada is doing both here at home and also globally to help advance and promote Afghan women's rights. We've also heard from our colleagues who lead organizations in Afghanistan on the current conditions that are facing Afghan women, facing their organizations, and the challenges through which they are carrying out their important work. In our panel, we're going to look at funding, advocacy, and what community-based strategies are available. What are we doing on the ground that is working? And how can we continue to support and strengthen these efforts? This is an incredibly important and timely discussion because in the last couple of weeks, we have seen a lot of changes and shifts take place in the United States. And with the ban on foreign aid, with the dismembering of USAID, and funding to all of the other large institutions and organizations in the United States, this has undoubtedly had ripple effects. It has affected all of our work here. It has affected the work of several European countries, several key multilateral institutions, the UN, the World Bank, and others. I was speaking with a colleague of mine in Kabul, and she mentioned to me that in one day, 50 Afghan-led organizations closed down. Just 50 in one day since the ban on foreign assistance. This shows to us that we are heading through very difficult times. Unfortunately, we've been treading a very high mountain in the last couple of months, in particular the last couple of years, trying to overcome the obstacles and trying to help and raise awareness on what's happening in Afghanistan. But I think that these challenges are going to increase in the next couple of years. What we see happening in the United States, I fear, is what we're going to start seeing happen in Europe as well. And this part of the world makes a substantial amount of the resources that go to the global south, including Afghanistan. So today I'd like to have a very open, I want to have a frank and honest discussion because dark times are ahead of us. Let's make no mistake about that. We are already facing a lot of difficulties, and I only see this getting tougher as we move on. But we never lose hope. Hope makes the world go round. So there's a lot we can do. We just have to come together. We have to collaborate. We have to build solidarity, and I'm sure we could get through it. With that said, I'm going to pose my very first question to Dr. Habiba Sarabi. And I'd like Dr. Sarabi to kickstart our discussion. Dr. Sarabi, how can Afghan women's rights organizations effectively advocate for gender justice at a global level, especially given the current restrictions inside of Afghanistan and the growing lack of international attention towards Afghanistan? Over to you, Dr. Saib. Sure. Then I will come to my second question to Ms. Nehan. What role do Afghan women in the diaspora play in shaping international policies and funding priorities for gender justice?
Thank you very much, Mariam John. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to Massey College for bringing this very important gathering together, as mentioned by Ms. Safi, at a very critical time that all of us are facing with multiple challenges inside Afghanistan and as well as globally. There are a couple of points that I would like to highlight, as you mentioned, that that will help us to have an open, frank, honest discussion that will actually help us to move forward. The point number one that I would like to mention is the acknowledgement of the fact that this whole process of managing the peace deal, withdrawal, and then after that engagement with the Taliban, and responding to plight, resistance, and resilience of women of Afghanistan was really mismanaged by the international community. We could see that while we kept on warning them about the lack of political will on the Taliban side for engaging into a genuine peace process, they invited us to the meetings. They had very beautiful high-level gatherings for us, but they never listened to us. And as a result of that, we saw that we end up in a situation that now all of us do not really know how to deal with the situation. I think acknowledgement of this fact is important because that actually can help you to see the leadership and agency of the women of Afghanistan and find ways to work with us because we care about our communities. For us, when we talk about Afghanistan, it's not only about our rights. It's about our community, it's about our people, it's about our country. We see much more bigger than that. And you will not once find one single woman in Afghanistan that will come forward and say that I'm ready to make a deal at the cost of the life and future of my people. You have that authenticity of leadership and care in Afghan women. When we are talking about support and shaping policies, we are not expecting only financial resources from the international community. There are many, many times that we have requested for political support. And there are times that political support is much more important than financial support. We have seen in the last 20 years that $1 trillion came to Afghanistan, and a good amount of that was actually allocated. Of course, most of that went to security, maybe 60 to 70%. But from the remaining of that, a good amount was dedicated to empowerment of the woman, engagement of the woman, political participation of women. If you're having those young girls inside Afghanistan going and protesting for their rights, it's just because those supports and assistance that came provided them with the opportunity to receive education, to become more aware. And that's why as soon as the policies came out restricting their rights, they all went and took life-threatening risks and protested for their rights. So I think many, many times for us, political support is more important than financial support. And when we say political support, that means that treat us as 50% of the population of our society. There were 2,000 Taliban, maybe there were 20,000 Taliban. The world was coming and trying to convince us that they are the reality of Afghanistan. After 2021, they keep on telling us that that is the reality of Afghanistan just because they control the territory and they have taken people as a hostage. But they never see us as the real and genuine reality of Afghanistan composed of 50% of the population.
Ms. Nehan, can I ask you a question on this point? In the last, since 2021, in the advocacy that Afghan women and yourself have been doing, what are the top 3 challenges that you have noticed when it comes to the international community providing political support?
Thank you. I was just coming to that question. So the point that you have about the challenges that we are facing, as I said, first of all, we have faced the lack of space and political support by the international community. I was part of so many discussions that we kept on requesting many countries that provide us with the space to come together to be able to talk amongst ourselves, how to organize ourselves. But unfortunately, we're not provided with that support. On top of that, we also have to understand that after August 2021, the situation has totally changed for the civil society and women groups inside Afghanistan and outside Afghanistan. Inside Afghanistan, the groups that they stayed and the groups that they are emerging, they cannot have vocal advocacy because of the restriction that they are facing, because of the security risk that they are facing. But they are focusing on building resilience of their communities. Outside Afghanistan, those of us that we have come to different countries and we have registered different organizations, we have created different platforms, we're continuously advocating. We need the space and the support to be able to continue that. Now, for that, we have to understand that, for example, an organization that has just registered 3 years back, 1 year back, or maybe a few months back, for them to come and compete and meet all the requirements of the a donor agency is very difficult. We need adoptable funding. We need small funding that will respond to their needs. And then on top of that, one thing that, as you mentioned, the funding cut that's coming from the US government, it's going to impact Afghanistan the most. In fact, Afghanistan is one of the 8 countries that's going to be impacted the most by this funding cut. So one of the ways that we can respond to the situation, that we really need to look at our approach. We have to change our approach. As we talked about Global South, I just talked about the local civil societies, national civil societies. We need to change our approach where we can provide more support and agency for local organizations that they take the lead, and then international organizations, especially UN agencies, can provide them with the support. There are a couple of recommendations that I have moving forward.
Could we save those a little
yes,
bit?
Absolutely. That's
end?
why I said that.
Yeah.
Like, I want to save that for the future because I know later, because I know that.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ms.
Thank
Nehan.
you.
Thank you. And building on the 2 points that you have made, I'd like to bring Dr. Habiba Sarabi into the discussion. I believe we have her with us now. And I'd like to ask you, Dr. Sarabi, in light of what Ms. Nehan said, the lack of political support for Afghan women by the international community, and now the lack of financial support that is going to follow the changes we are seeing in the United States and soon enough in Europe as well. In this type of environment, what role can Afghan women in the diaspora play in shaping policies and, most importantly, funding priorities for gender justice in Afghanistan? Where do you see availability, and what can Afghan women in the diaspora do at this time with these growing challenges?
Thank you very much, Mariam John. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
I'm sorry for the previous technical problem, which was maybe from my side. But anyway, very warm salam to everyone and good afternoon. Thank you for organizing, for the organizer to set up this meeting, which is very important. So with this situation, especially inside the country, that and day by day, the problem can be, more hard and more difficult. And from the other side, yes, the US cut the fund, and it will come out with the other country or European country. This one affect the organization and the work that Afghan women and women advocate will face with that. But there are some possibility in that Afghan women can organize themselves. One of the platform or one of the area that we can continue our advocacy is this online platform. You know that this at this moment, for example, people are joining from different parts of the globe. And so this platform is mostly the people can use, and the organization and different, policymaker or advocacy program can use this one. So, but we have to remember about this, our friends or international colleagues, that we can divide them in two sides or in two categories. One category, of course, Ms. Nehan mentioned about that there is not political will to support the women's advocate in Afghanistan. But we have to remember, but there are some women in organization and some government that they are supporting Afghan women. For example, the case of ICG and ICC that came out, and it was not possible without the support and without the collaboration of international community. We appreciate all these governments that they are standing for Afghan women, that they are advocating. So we can continue, we can build a network among women, and as well that we have to use different platforms and that we can raise our voice. For example, from the Security Council, the CSW, UNGA, Human Rights Council, or parliamentarian. The world parliamentarian or international and different country parliamentarian can play a big role. And also we can connect with the Congress women in United States to get their support, and it will help us a lot.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Sarabi. I would like to move on to our third speaker, Dr. Dehqan. And I'd like to ask you, Dr. Saib, what in the current climate of funding restrictions, what are some alternative sources of funding that Afghan women-led organizations inside of Afghanistan and those currently outside can look towards to help fill the gap that will now be created by the cuts coming from major donors around the world? And how can they make this funding sustainable for their efforts in Afghanistan?
Thank you, Mariam John. Hello, everyone. Thank you for so much for your invitation. It's a pleasure for me to participate for this conference. Women in Afghanistan are facing a lot of very economical and systemical. They have a lot of problems. But I had one small plans for this problem. For this plan for our colleagues, they worked in the 2021 until now. We research about this problem in the history in our country. And now we have a lot of articles public about this problem, how they can solution. But in the first practice, we have one models planned for this solution. The first I want to explain about practice these models because we know now women in Afghanistan, they cannot work in the outside, just they work in the rooms. They can use this opportunity. The first, before they go in the market, they need to knowledge in about market economy. The first, we have to teach for them for about knowledge how they can work in the market globals, because it's very important. The second, and after they have enough knowledge about market, social international, or how they can divide it, supply product or something like this, and after they can come in the market. But in the time they come in the markets, they have more problem too. For example, the first they will start some good example about women. They can participate for some like dairy farm, chicken and eggs factory, and more 100 products they can make. And another is they can make beautiful clothes. But they have problem in the platform. The first, the second, they have problem about receive money. For about platform, it's better we make one platform for all women, for Afghanistan women, is like platform Amazon or Alibaba or something like this. They can sell them product. The second, they have problem about banking, because in my country, we use traditional system. We have problem about receive money. For like this problem, the first we can solution with like transfer, some like Safi. The second, we can use like some like online banking, but is very early in my country because they don't have knowledge using online bank too. But we can use another part is like Western Union, because now in my country have office, they can use like online account, and after they go and take money. But it's very important because we know in duration 2020 and before these times we have a lot of funding for women, but all is not successful because all is like for short time, is they don't teach for them for continue. It's very important we make for them market, and after we sell for them, and after they have the money, they can continue works, they have market for supply product, and after they very early, very easy, they receive the money too.
Thank you very much. And now moving along to Ms. Naheed Farid. Ms. Farid, I'd like to ask you, and I know you're in DC and often in discussion with policymakers on some of these issues. I'd like to see if you could also touch upon the issue of how we as Afghan women who lead organizations, institutions in Afghanistan, and the many that are currently in Afghanistan despite the shrinking civic space, how can they overcome this funding gap? What are some opportunities? If you can give me some concrete and specific examples of what is available to us in Afghanistan that we could use, and how can organizations specifically inside of Afghanistan that are currently working on gender justice? Because I know that there are organizations that work on several different areas and sectors, but when it comes to gender justice specifically, what are the types of work that they are doing? Where do you see their impact the most? And what can we do to strengthen those?
Sure. Mariam, John, it is my honor to be part of this panel. Thank you so much for your moderation. And thank you, Massey College, for holding this important, timely, unprecedented, historical conference to support women of Afghanistan at the time that they are at the greatest juncture of the history of their needs. And thank you, Mariam, for the wonderful question. I'm so sorry I couldn't move. I couldn't come to you guys. I couldn't be there in person. I wish I could be there. But I'm sure Afghan leaders and so many of Afghan women represent my thought throughout the day. And the question you highlighted bring me back to the time I personally started working different capacity to support women's rights, to support human rights, to support legislations. And I think at least to me, 4 more important elements that combine a successful strategy to move forward was one, a diplomatic engagement. How we can have different countries that are within the same level of understanding with Afghan women at the same page, diplomatically supporting and advocate for us. 2, legal accountability. That was also another element that could support and help the causes. Coalition building, a 3rd element that you know and I know and everyone know is important. Just wanted to highlight it because I think it's good to remind everyone how important it is to be united. And 4th, the structured policy mechanism, how we can move policies, how we can support those kind of frameworks that can ensure a sustained commitment from different governments to help Afghan women. Afghan women are there, but how we can connect them to international supports. One example, I would like a concrete example that you asked is that I think that's the most significant advancement that has been to push, recognize gender apartheid, contextualize gender apartheid as a crime against humanity under international law. I think that was an example. It was one unified, articulated, straightforward, solid message that reflect all elements of an effective advocacy that could manage the diplomatic engagement, could manage legal accountability, could manage coalition building, could manage structured these policy mechanisms And these are very important, I mean, aspects of how we can move together and united towards one direction in a very straightforward manner. But another component of the question, Mariam, John, you highlighted, is that, you know, we are in a very different era. We see this critical challenge in global advocacy for Afghan women. And this is the instability and unpredictability of international political landscape. The international political players have different kind of aspirations and policies in different time. Government shift policies based on their domestic political priorities, ideological changes, geopolitical interests, and this is in front of the consistent commitment to human rights. You know, this is in contradiction. This issue is happening in United States these days, a prime example of this instability. Mariam, John, I think
to build on what you had just mentioned a minute ago, I wanted to ask you, in the campaign against codifying gender apartheid, we didn't get gender apartheid in the ICC. We got gender persecution. It is one good step. It is heading towards the right direction. Hopefully in the future, we'll also have gender apartheid utilized, because that is how Afghan women inside of the country describe their conditions. But I wanted to ask you, in the campaign, what type of, because there's a lot of narratives outside that this was a campaign led by Afghan women outside of Afghanistan who were campaigning for gender apartheid because they were not living under a authoritarian regime, or because the women in Afghanistan don't describe their conditions as gender apartheid. But I don't believe that that was the case. There was a lot of coordination with organizations inside of the country. Can you give us an example of some of that coordination that took place and that continues to take place in various shapes and forms? Can you give us an idea about that?
Sure. Mariam, John, the disconnect between women inside of the country and women outside of the country because of so many issues, beside of the issue of Taliban oppression, the lack of access to virtual world, the lack of access to data, the lack of access to so many other issues, increases this gap between women who are inside and outside. But what is apartheid? Apartheid is a segregation of women because they are women, because of their gender identity, lack of having access to education, to their basic human rights, to their basic kind of other rights like access to healthcare, lack of access to their economic rights. And these are apartheid. These are happening in Afghanistan. I think that the reason that we keep pushing this gender apartheid campaign is that it is unifying us. It is very articulated. Mariam, John, when you tell this to an international policymaker, it is very articulated. It is very straightforward. We don't have to say so many sentences to describe what's going on in the country when we say it's apartheid based on gender in Afghanistan. And I think that's how this can be described. But the issue of the issue that you highlighted earlier about ICC, ICJ did not recognize this as a context to move forward with their proceedings. I agree with you, because it is not an international accepted terminology. It is not inside of the proceedings paperwork. But in fact, so many of this, even gender segregation, gender persecution, also was not part of international legal terminology and literature. This kind of campaign was behind each terminology, and it takes years, not just months to move such kind of movements forward. And therefore, I want to highlight what Mariam John Monsef mentioned this morning. A formal advisory group of Canadian, US, Afghan women, this group to be formalized to ensure that Afghan women directly involved in funding allocation, in resettlement policies, in legal advocacy, in gender apartheid, and so many other campaigns in supporting ICC, ICJ cases. In this group has to form with having different policymakers joining with those who are shaping foreign policy, ensuring direct funding, those who are civil society members want to join to continue this, not just because it is a cause for Afghan men, because we want this to be permanent. We don't want those short-sighted policies of countries like the United States that Trump administration pause this very important, vital mission of human rights and women's rights in Afghanistan.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Farid. Yes, I agree. I think one of the things that we have certainly learned in the last couple of years, especially Afghan women after the fall of the Republic, and now the cut in funding, which at least to me feels like another collapse. We're going through another collapse. I mean, for me, it has the same triggering impacts, like we have to start again. But we have certainly learned that when it comes to the international community, which isn't much of a community these days, if you look at it, oftentimes they say that Afghan women are not on the same page. But I mean, show me that where the international community is on the same page. They haven't been for the last 4.5 years. And we've seen that at the UN Security Council up and close. And so it is time, certainly, for Afghan women to be able to chart their own path, their own long-term, their midterm, and their short-term goals, and move head-on. Because there are a lot of support from institutions like the one we're in to various other institutions around the world. We've got many forums. We've got the Afghan Women Leaders Forum run by the EU. We have another forum that started a couple of years ago by counterpart, Afghan Women's Voices, Unifying Our Voices. We have Stronger Together, which started all the way back in Afghanistan, that has hundreds of Afghan women activists and organizations all a part of it. And it started with a WhatsApp text message. And then, I mean, and it continues to play a vital role. So there are already 3-4 very large forums out there that have been working for the last couple of years, getting together. So they already provide us an existing grounds and an existing opportunity that we can use and build upon. So we do have a lot of those opportunities that are still available to us. At this stage, before I proceed to asking a few more questions from the panelists, I'd like to open it to the audience. We'll take a few questions and we'll revert back to our speakers, and then I'll go to my last set of questions to each. Are there any questions there or any questions online? We've got a question up front.
Thank you. I want to show everybody a picture. I don't know if you can see. Can everybody see this picture? It's a group of women in Paktia province. It's a group of women in Paktia province, which is the southern part of Afghanistan. Because the level of violence is so high, so they come together on weekly basis and they bring in the cases of. So other women bring their cases, which is very much forced marriage, for example, family violence. There's a lot of women in exchange in Bad, which is like girls are being given to another family because of the dispute, to settle a dispute. So these women, what they do is that they convene, they hear these cases, and then they have established another group, which I'll show you their picture. Which is a group of men. So they have identified the men that can actually help them. So if you can see this picture, which is group of men, then these women bring in those cases to these men because these women cannot get out of home, right? So they bring the cases to the men, and then that's how they create allies, and they want to find a solution. The reason I wanted to show this is that we have women who have made this kind of work possible in a dictatorship, in a situation like we have in Afghanistan right now, that these women could actually be, if they are found by the Taliban, they would be imprisoned, you know, they would be detained, and lots of things that would happen to them that we don't know. And yeah, even they are not literate, but they understand that the violence that's happening to them is wrong. The marriage which is being forced on them is wrong, or the community violence that's happening is wrong. So what I want to say is that last week, we got an email. This was funded by National Endowment for Democracy from the US Congress for the past 4 years. And we got an email that we got this stop. I still haven't asked these women to stop this because I don't have the courage to do that. We have facilitators who are doing these kind of projects. So the question is, imagine these women are doing this in those conditions, but what about current situation? What new allies we need to find? So the question I want to ask is, for example, Canada has identified new funding for many other organizations, but we are a local organization. We are registered in Canada. I can't even read those, you know, I can't even fill up those forms. It would take me, you know, I can do so many other things in between. So how do I make those proposals? And then they say, oh, you're not, what is it called? The CRA, what is it? Those rules. You're not that, you're not those. Like, imagine, how can we continue our work? So I'll not continue more. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, we've got another question up here.
Thank you so much. It's nice to be here. My name is Aisha Siddiqui, and my question is, what role can digital platforms play in uniting international communities to advocate for Afghans' women's rights? Thank you.
Thank you. We have a question at the end.
Been working in the international development field since the late 80s. And this is a second cycle in terms of international retreat from Afghanistan. I don't think that you can look at 2010 to 2020 as a good example of what's possible or which allies you can depend on. I think you might want to look back to the 1990s and look for organizations that were working in solidarity and are still in that field. And I've seen many people try to create new organizations, try to become registered charities, wasting your time. Better for you to work with an existing organization. It saves a lot of resources. There are still organizations out there. And the same kinds of organizations that people built solidarity networks, either around unions or other causes, are still the ones to go to. The digital platforms, the research on Obama, who capitalized the idea of digital campaigns, it's a good additional tool, but the face-to-face grassroots organizing around institutions that have physical spaces where you can meet, which are union halls, churches, religious institutions, it's still the place to organize. Those are still the allies that you can make friends with. And even some of the, evangelical churches. I'm not an advocate. I don't even belong to one. I have spent 2 years living in an evangelical community, but that's not my background. There are chinks in the Gramscian armor that you guys can exploit. But you got to reach out and you got to work on the grassroots level.
Thank you. I agree. I agree with you, sir, that we can't expect to look at the same partners as we did during the 20 years of the Republic. I mean, that was a huge state building, nation building, peace building, whichever you want to call it. It was a mission of that sort, and that's not something that's likely to take place. Nor are you going to have 140 something plus countries again interested in Afghanistan, both financially or militarily. But I just slightly disagree on going back to the 90s, only because you're not dealing with an Afghanistan that is of the 90s right now. 90s were predominantly humanitarian related work. And what you have now is an Afghanistan that has been given to the Taliban. An Afghanistan has been given to the Taliban that has its infrastructure in place. It has its government institutions were in place. It continues to still have a civic space there that is ready to work. And you have a population. I mean, in Afghanistan, 74% of the population was below the age of 24. A lot of these folks were born in 2000 and were 20 and 21 when the international community left. We have a youth bulge in Afghanistan that only knows democracy. Yes, it was a young democracy. It had its very difficult challenges, or we wouldn't be here today. But you have that society. And so this society, in order for it to grow and not reverse, we need to be able to offer it new and innovative solutions that match their mindsets. That's why I would say that we have to, as Afghan organizations, look for alternative and unique funding streams. Private sector is one area that we've hardly really tapped into. We need to look at corporate social responsibility. We need to look at the private sector. A lot of the work that we do doesn't need a whole ton of money in Afghanistan either. We all do a lot of work with very little, if you look at it. And so what we need to do is tap into these alternative resources. And also by other partners, we need to look at the East. We need to look at countries in the East that do have funding that we haven't traditionally approached to be able to support these institutions. And I think that is certainly a possibility that requires some exploration, I think, from our side. But with those questions in hand, I'd like to go to Dr. Sarabi, if you would like to answer any of those questions.
Can I ultimately add a question as well,
Sure.
just relevant to what you're talking about, which I think hasn't been touched on and is so critical, is the political support piece. This whole discussion has been around humanitarian efforts versus like humanitarian aid versus political support and how governments could be doing more on the political support lens. I wanted to add it because everyone's touched on it and I think it's so critical. There's government representatives in the room, Canadian government representatives who could be honing in on these discussions and taking some valuable pieces of information back. I'm working on a piece around Canada's obligations. I'd love to hear more from you about where you think that political support can come from and what that looks like other than humanitarian aid, because we have appealed to the Canadian government before. And what we have heard is that humanitarian aid is what they have given. And it's a constant emphasis. David Sproul, we spoke to him, constant emphasis around humanitarian aid. Would love to hear what you have to say about political support. Thanks.
Thank you for that. Dr. Sarabi, would you like to answer any of the questions?
Thank you very much. It was rather than a question, it was common, but anyway, I want to, highlight for some points. About the digital platform, at the beginning, I also mentioned that I talked about the technology, that today the technology can resolve many things. And of course, you, the young generation, you use the proper word, digital platform. Yes, the digital platform is one of the platform that we can use a lot. And also, we have to tie the coordination among the existing institution and existing organization that carrying on the advocacy inside Afghanistan. There are so many reliable organization and NGOs that they are working, and still they have fun. We have to have a tight coordination with them and to support each other. For example, as you have the DROP still working there, the Rawadori Human Rights Center, and this the block analyst network. These are the organization that we can get evidence from them and to use for our advocacy for gender justice. And so the other topic, of course, I am from old generation. We used to have that during the Russian occupation or Soviet Union. We come together voluntarily. So we have to step up a little bit toward the volunteerism. We have to make a network of volunteers that they can work together. We can work together with them. I'm coming to the points that Mariam John, you raised about the gender apartheid, an issue that the international community is saying that the people, it is some phenomenon that coming from the women that they are outside the country or the diaspora. But it is, of course, it needs a little bit more education, more awareness among the women, among the people who are inside Afghanistan, because these people need some sort of awareness in education. It means that when the international accuse us that this is only for diaspora, I can tell you, for example, give you an example that if some person can fill in the wheel, fill in the wheel, and the other people can just look to that and don't try to pick his or her hand to move it, to pull it from the wheel. So it is meaning like that. We have to find a way that how we can support them, how we can rescue them. But anyway, there are many women inside Afghanistan that they know about the gender apartheid. For example, last Friday, the WFA, we had a meeting with women inside the country. A lady from Helmand, she was emphasizing on the gender apartheid, that for the recognition of gender apartheid. Believe me that she was from Helmand. I cannot give you the name because of safety and security. I cannot give you the name, but we have even recorded the voice, but we cannot, of course, release that. But she was talking about the gender apartheid. So it doesn't mean that all the women that they are outside the country or in diaspora, they are raising the gender apartheid. We have to educate the people. We have to give them awareness that they can, they understand their rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sarabi. Ms. Nehan, over to you, both in terms of whichever question you would like to address and also in terms of some of the recommendations you were going to touch upon.
Thank you, Mariam John. In order to save time, and some of the questions were actually already addressed by yourself very eloquently and as well as by rest of the speakers. In order to save time, I would like to share three recommendations for us moving forward. I think for us, for the women of Afghanistan, first of all, we have proven in the last 3 years that we had the will. And when there is a will, there is a way. We have used digital platform, we have used WhatsApp groups, we have used whatever we could to stay connected, to continue our work. In terms of gender apartheid, expecting a woman sitting in the village of Afghanistan to come and tell you that what is gender apartheid and explain to you what is gender apartheid, I think is too naive. And it's being just intentionally used to delegitimize our advocacy. There is an institutional and systematic discrimination against women inside Afghanistan because of their gender. Now it's up to the world whether they call it gender apartheid or not. It's just a matter of the reality. It is happening. Whether the women of Afghanistan, because they don't know the term gender apartheid, you say, oh, they don't want it, so that's why we don't acknowledge it as gender apartheid. So moving forward for us, building unity amongst ourselves is really important. And we also have to understand that we as a woman have very different roles and responsibility that we have been trying to play. I focused on women's rights in the last 3 years. But since few months, suddenly I've realized that building cohesion amongst ourselves, coming up with a roadmap not only for women of Afghanistan, but as a roadmap for future of Afghanistan is something that if we leave it for men of Afghanistan or the international community, once again, they will come with something which might give us a break, but it's going to eventually collapse. We have to come together. We have to find ways to talk about our differences. We have to find ways that we create that roadmap. We take that responsibility, that leadership, that we develop that roadmap where actually we don't only focus on the women's rights, which is very much important, but also about bringing a sustainable peace through a political pathway for Afghanistan. That is, I see that responsibility coming towards women, whether we take it or we don't take it. If we don't take it, Afghanistan will continue as it has in the last 3 years. But if we take, I'm confident that we can find some way to be able to address that. And then there are, the last point that I would like to make is that having the reapproach by the international community is really important. We understand there is funding shrink, but at least the little funding that you have should really be designed in a way that most of that is actually going on the ground and to the beneficiaries and end user, rather than they get least of it and international organization gets most of it. The very last point, just 1 second, I want to make is the call by by the government of Canada, which we really appreciate. And but in the meantime, we are also concerned because we think that once again it's going to be a number of big international organizations getting that funding, where actually they might come with some fancy project that they will decide and few international big conferences that they'll get for us, but it will leave us in the end of the day nothing once that project's finished, and we'll be left with nothing to continue. So I really hope that we'll be able to address these issues, and that's where flexibility and adaptability comes. And we can submit you the papers that what do we mean by flexibility and adaptability, where actually we also maintain the level of transparency and accountability that required. Thank you.
Ms. Naheed, just a follow-up,
Yeah.
and very quickly, you said that we need to have a political path forward. Do you see something that has started? And if you don't see anything that has started, where can we start from? Just 30 seconds.
Right now, there are some initiatives that have taken place, but I see that there are a lot of, they're being led by men. And I don't think that will give us the result that we need for the future of Afghanistan. What I see is the willingness among the women to take that responsibility and move forward. The starting point for us is that I believe in bringing together all those that they have been active, they have worked constructively for Afghanistan, the women, that we come together and we develop a roadmap and discuss how we can take it forward. Whether anybody supports us or they don't support us, it doesn't matter. We have to continue because that is the need of our country.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And I'd just like to give the floor to Ms. Dehqan. I'm sorry, we're really running out of time. Just 1 minute for your final remarks or any of the questions you'd like to address.
Thank you so much. I will answer very short. I will speak about platform digital. Is right, in duration 2021 until now, we platform digital for education, we work a lot. But for economic and work women, we don't work anything. We have to start because women, if don't have money, is meaning they cannot do anything. Just this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will close our 4th session. Thank you very much to our panelists and to our audience. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariam Khanum and the distinguished panelists, for yet another very rich discussion. We now are going to have closing remarks by a very distinguished online guest, Dr. Seema Samar, notable human rights advocate, activist, and medical doctor, after which I will make some concluding remarks. A Nobel Peace Prize nominee, renowned human rights advocate, and a global influential female figure, Dr. Seema Samar has dedicated her life to public service, humanitarian work, and women's empowerment. From 2000 to 2019, she was the chairperson of the Afghanistan Independent Human Rights Commission, holding human rights violators accountable and setting the human rights agenda in Afghanistan. Dr. Samar is the chair of the Commission for the Prevention of Torture and was the chair of the Asia-Pacific Forum of National Human Rights Institutions. She has continuously advocated for the world's underrepresented and marginalized groups. She was the vice president of the Interim Administration of Afghanistan and the first Minister of Women's Affairs. She served as the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights in the Sudan between 2005 and 2009, and was appointed a member of the UN Secretary General's High-Level Advisory Opinion on Mediation in 2009. In addition to all those qualifications, I've had the privilege of knowing Dr. Samar now for many years, and she's truly an exceptional person. Dr. Samar, the floor is yours. Welcome.
Salam to everyone and good afternoon. And thank you so much, Dr. Akhawan, for very encouraging introduction. But I keep saying that I might have been part of the failure in Afghanistan also. But thank you so much. I'm sorry that I was not able to join you, and it's a missed opportunity for me that I couldn't be there with you. And I'm very grateful to you and your colleagues for organizing this program. Although I didn't follow up all the programs, but I just want to mention a few points. One, I think the road to equality and justice for the victims of human rights violation, or for justice for anyone, is a very long one and a very difficult one. And we have to have a lot of patience and a lot of commitment and dedication to go and walk this difficult, bumpy roads in order to reach to that. So we should have a lot of patience. We should have, we should not afraid from threatening by people, even attacking on our personality and our life even. So that is one point. The second thing, I think it's very as I said, it's a very difficult road, and we individually cannot really walk to this road alone and achieve the goal that we have ahead of us. So we need to acknowledge the existence of everyone and have inclusive approach in order to reach to the main goal, which is justice for the victims of human rights violation of human rights, and also justice for the people who have been victims of violence and aggression, not only in Afghanistan, but around the world. I'm talking about Afghanistan now, that millions of our sisters and women in Afghanistan and young girls in Afghanistan living under the regime of I don't have any other word except apartheid regime. So people like it or not, that is the reality, but we have to fight for even to make to push for recognition of gender apartheid in Afghanistan and criminalize and codify it in the international law. The third point, I think, is that we are different people and we have different opinion and different behavior. But what is really important that we have a set of goal that we have to make for us and to try to achieve to that goal. And I think that is, if we have justice in Afghanistan for women on under the Taliban or before Taliban, and any gender sexual-based violence around the world, and also in particularly in Afghanistan, then we can actually pave the road or making the road easier for the other countries in justice for sexual gender-based violence and conflict countries and non-conflict countries, because it's not only the conflict countries, unfortunately, it is also in the countries which is not in conflict. The people keep saying that it's a backlash, but I would say that it's taking us back another 100 years in most of the countries that we see in the policies and the politics around equal rights of women or gender equality. The fourth point that I would like to mention is that we welcome the ICC call for gender prosecution. I think that's a first step and a strong step. We have to really lobby and do a lot of advocacy in order to make it a reality. This is first time after so many years of advocacy and struggle in order to make it possible at least to call for the justice for women in Afghanistan. Not only women, but it's a lot of other war crimes and crimes against humanity continues to happen in Afghanistan. But this is a first step, and we welcome that, and we all have to stand to push for that and support that policy. Although it's not an easy, as I said at the beginning, but we have no other choice not to fight for this. The fifth point that I would like to mention is that I think we in Afghanistan, we have experienced the right and the left. I mean, we had experience of the USSR invasion in the country, and then we had the experience of our own Mujahideen and Taliban, and then again, the previous government and the international forces in Afghanistan, but we end up unfortunately, with a failure. What is really important, it's the people of Afghanistan has to come together and take their future on their hand and take the agenda for fighting. I have to admit that I'm really disappointed that the Afghan men are not really strongly standing with us. I mean, there are some, but it's not enough. And there should be more people, because what is happening the policy of Taliban against women and girls are in place in Afghanistan is not a problem of only few people like Sima Samar or the previous panel member. It is a problem of every household, including the Taliban themselves and their families, because they actually destroy the future of Afghanistan, not allowing women to be active, to have active role and have access to education. As we all know that education is really the tool and a good road for empowerment of society, and particularly of empowerment of women. The sixth point that I would like to mention is that whatever policy that we have, it should be, of course, women should be in the center of those policies, and human dignity should be in the center of those policies. So that is really key, that we should not really fight or compete for very limited amount of resources that exist, and just talk against each other and try to weaken our movement or our existence and our advocacy, actually, in the very, very difficult environment that we are today. So that is a key. We have to accept each other. We have to acknowledge each other's work. We all cannot be one kind of a hero. That's very natural everywhere, not only in Afghanistan. We see it in Iran. Dr. Ahawan, you might agree with me. It is same in Pakistan and other countries in our region and outside of our region. So we have to accept that we are different people. We are diverse people, but we have to acknowledge that each one of us can play a positive role in order to bring change and positive change in Afghanistan. The seventh point that I would like to mention is that we should really continue our advocacy strongly to not normalize the human rights violation, because it's really a scary situation that we see that they are trying to normalize the Taliban's behavior in Afghanistan. And as usual, they use the excuse of respecting culture and respecting the religion of Afghanistan. The culture and the religion of Afghanistan is not what the Taliban is trying to expose to the people. And then finally, my point is that no matter how dark is the night, it will be sun next morning, but we have to actually fight against the degradation of environment in order for the sun to shine next morning. So I hope that it's a March is coming and the new year is coming. At least the mullahs in Iran are allowing the people to have the Nowruz, but even for the people in Afghanistan, we are not allowed to celebrate our new year. But I would say that Taliban's like it or not, the red flower in Afghanistan and the poppy flower and the wildflower in Afghanistan will grow. Maybe less in the number, but it will grow and we will have a spring. They cannot stop spring from coming. So I think my final word again is we have to acknowledge the suffering of women, millions of women in Afghanistan, and we have to salute them for their resistance. And I wish you all a very good day and fruitful discussion. And thank you for giving me the chance to speak to you all. And it's so good to see some of you. I wish I was there to hug you all because anyway, I don't want to cry because I cried last year.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samar. And indeed, you were here last year on International Women's Day. We missed you very much, but we're glad at least that we could benefit from your presence remotely. And this brings me to the conclusion of this remarkable event. And I'm reminded by the great book of the French writer Roland Barthes, The Eiffel Tower and Other Mythologies. And he speaks about how the world looks when you're on top of a tower, looking out at the arena in what he calls the euphoria of aerial vision. And Roland Barthes explains how on top of the tower, you feel on top of the world without being a part of it. And that describes perhaps much of what I've experienced in my 35-year career, working with the United Nations, working with elite universities, working as a practitioner before the international courts and tribunals in The Hague in the so-called Hague bubble. And it is too often the case that those in the tower do not connect with those in the arena. So I'm really grateful, first and foremost, to all of the outstanding women of Afghanistan for educating us, for telling us about the reality of struggle and suffering and selfless sacrifice that you embody in the arena, so that perhaps those of us in this other world can begin to consider how best to connect our efforts with your reality on the ground. And among the many, many outstanding presentations here, of course, we also had many of the women who've literally been the prisoners of the Taliban, not in the greater prison that the Taliban has created, but in the literal sense of those who have been victims of the abuse and torture. So it's been a very humbling experience for me. I thank you very much for being here. I also want to give a very big thank you to the organizers and partners, Massey College, of course, Principal Orbinski for support staff, Joe Costa, who has been our amazing electronic genius, who has made sure everything flows smooth. Thank you very much, Joe. Sarah Baum, the kitchen and catering staff, and countless others who made this possible, but most of all to Alyssa Ginsberg. Are you in the room, Alyssa, or am I thanking you for, there we go. There we go. I thanked you in the morning and you weren't here, so you get a second thank you, and really you've been outstanding. Of course, I wish to also thank Debevoise and Plimpton, Julian Marley and Sarah Cuffart, who were sitting right there until they had to rush off to the airport. They flew in from New York, and they had also put in a lot of time and effort on a volunteer basis to make this conference happen. Of course, there's the high-level expert group on gender justice that you heard from, my distinguished colleagues, Catherine Amifar, Naheed Farid, Professor Rangita da Silva de Alwis, the Elahe Omidyar Mir Jalali Institute of Iranian Studies at the University of Toronto, and our volunteers, Nusha Kezat, Chenzong, Jendus, and Emily Mockler. And last but not least, I also want to thank once again our colleagues from Global Affairs Canada that made the trip from Ottawa here. Your presence here was exceptionally valuable. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule. A summary of the discussions and recommendations will be available thanks to Cassie sitting in the back and the International Human Rights Program at the Faculty of Law. So thank you for having been volunteered by me at the 11th hour, Cassie. Thank you very much. And we will see how we can circulate that so you all have access to it. So this brings me to the end of this remarkable event, and being from this same cultural space as my Afghan brothers and sisters, we have to begin and end with some poetry. So with your permission, I close with the words of the great Iranian feminist poet Farrukhzad. And you may know this particular one where she says, Yek shab ze maverای siyahi ha chun akhtari be suye to mi ayam. One night from beyond the darkness, I shall come towards you like a radiant star. And I think that this is exactly the theme that our Afghan sisters have been not just talking about, but a living example of. And the world might sometimes seem dark, but in the darkness, we also discover the astonishing light of our own being. So once again, thank you very much. We now have an informal opportunity to connect, reflect on the day's discussion, and explore collaborations back in the upper library. And we are asked to evacuate this room as quickly as we can for another event. So thank you very much, and Khuda Hafiz.